I know you're there. My name's Louise, and it's very strange talking to a black space. And I'm a member of a relatively new organisation called Raven, which stands for Refugee and Volunteer Empowerment Network. Yes, I can see you a little bit more now. 3.5 years ago, I went out to the tiny Greek island of Leros with this amazing and inspiring woman who's going to tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. And it changed my life because I went out to support and to help refugees who were on the island at the time. And when I came back, all I wanted to do was stand on the rooftops and scream to everybody that would listen to me, please will you listen to the truth of the situation, because what you see on the news and what you read in the papers, and it's not even in the news anymore, is so far removed from the reality of the situation. And anyway, 3.5 years on, we've created this organisation, and our mission really is to educate people, is to have conversations with new people, which is why I'm so touched tonight, because I know some of you in the audience, but I don't know most of you, and for a long time we've been talking to the same people, and you know, it's just wonderful to reach a new audience, and I'm so grateful to you for being here tonight, and really want to acknowledge that the money you've paid to see these amazing musicians perform free of charge is all going to go to the cause tonight, so that's fantastic. So one of the things, thank you very much. So Raven, what our mission is to have these conversations, but also when we have the conversations and we share what we know about the refugee crisis and about personal stories of refugees that we've met, is to then create opportunities for anybody then that actually says, well, do you know what, now I've heard your story, I really want to do something. And it can be the tiniest thing. It can be, you know, collecting some clothes that you've got at home that don't fit anymore and, you know, you're happy to give away. It can be, maybe there's somebody that teaches English and you could teach English to resettled families that have moved into Flintshire or Denbighshire. It could be volunteering with a local organisation. It could be volunteering abroad like Anne and I did. So that's what we do, and it's kind of just all coming together, because yesterday I was with another colleague and we gave a talk to 180 primary school children about refugees, which was a bit overwhelming. There was a little 4-year-old sitting in the front, and they gave us carloads of donations to bring back. And here we are tonight having this incredible fundraising gig with all of you listening and learning perhaps something you didn't know before. And I'm just moved beyond words, really. So I'm going to pass you over now to Anne, because Anne and Penny are the crux to this, really, because we had a meeting, a Raven meeting. We have information sharing meetings from time to time where we invite people who have had experience of working with refugees to come along and share their stories. And the idea is that people who are interested in finding out more, they come along, they hear the stories, and it maybe will trigger, you know, something in them that they want to do something to help. So this is what happened back in October or November last year. We had such a meeting. Anne was there, and she shared a story. Penny, I won't tell you anymore, I'll let Anne tell the story, but this is the lovely Anne Crossland.
Good evening, everybody. I'm not a public speaker. I'm probably going to stumble quite a lot, so please bear with me. Thank you. I'm here as a volunteer with. I volunteer with a group called
Renew.
Renew. I've just stumbled over that. Renew, which is Refugee Essentials North East Wales. We basically are a local community group which comes under the umbrella of CareUK, and we collect essential items which are needed by the refugees, generally in Greece, but we've also sent things out to Syria. And as part of CareUK, we've been involved in sending 47 container loads of aid out to those refugees in need. We're based in Buckley and in Carmel, just outside of Holywell, and we're always delighted to have anybody come and help us volunteer with our community sorting and packing and eventually loading containers. On behalf of Renew, I'd like to thank everybody for their participation, for their support, and especially to the musicians who've given us a wonderful first half, and I'm sure the second half is going to be equally wonderful tonight. I'd like to just share a little bit of experience to give you a feel of some of what we experienced in 2015. Leros is a very small Greek island in the Dodecanese. From the coast of Leros on a clear day, you can see buildings on the Turkish coast. And we went there at the height of the refugee crisis when hundreds and hundreds of people were arriving on a daily basis. These people were leaving Turkey in inflatable boats. And for people to put their families in these boats, you have to understand that what they were leaving was more dangerous than the crossing that they were about to embark on. They generally had enough fuel just to take them to a halfway point, which is a small island called Farmakonisi, which is basically a rock with nothing on it, apart from a military base. And there are no beaches on Farmakonisi. It's basically a rocky crop coming out of the sea. So these boats would get that far and people would have to clamber out of the boats. And we met women who were 9 months pregnant, people who were carrying twin babies. We met amputees, elderly people, all manner of people that were having to make this journey and scramble over these rocks and then wait until the Coast Guard from Leros could actually go out and collect them. Sometimes they were there on this rocky island for a matter of hours, and sometimes it was a couple of days with no shelter and no food apart from the water and the very basic provision, some biscuits sometimes given by the army. So that's where we were in 2015, and we were on the island of Leros, which the Coast Guard brought these people to us in boats. And what we were trying to do was initially give them foil blankets, give them water, and help them. So I'd just like to share a couple of experiences from that time. We were part of a group receiving these people who'd arrived. They were very cold, they were very wet, they were very frightened, but delighted to have reached safety in Europe. And one of the men came up to me, and he stood right very, very close up to me, and he told me that he needed my help and he needed to know what to say. Now, he was in a line waiting for initial registration where these people are fingerprinted and the documentation process starts. And part of that is they have to identify where they're from. And he was aware, and he understood at that time, that if you were a refugee from Syria, you were likely to have refugee status. But other countries perhaps wouldn't be so fortunate at that time. He told me that he was from Iraq, and the question he was asking of me was, should I tell them that I'm from Syria? Should I tell these officials that I'm from Syria? Tell me, what do I say to them? Because I have these papers, and he brought out some documents in a waterproof bag, and they were the medical notes of his small daughter who'd had neurosurgery. And he said that he was desperate to get treatment for her, which she could no longer have in Iraq. And he'd come, and he wanted his family to come later. And the enormity of the question he was asking of me sort of overwhelmed me, and I felt my eyes just fill up. I didn't know what to say to him. And the refugees that were around, they came to me and put their arms around me. They were comforting me because I didn't know what to say to him. Fortunately, I pulled myself together and I went and found a British lawyer who was also there volunteering, and she told me to tell him to tell the truth because the officials would know where he was from by his language, by his accent. So that's one little story I wanted to share. Another one is that my background is nursing, and I'm well and truly retired. But the UNHCR one day, their translator asked me to please look after a young mother who had recently given birth since she'd arrived on the island. I went to see her and he translated for me. She was sitting in a derelict building, which is where the refugees, if they were lucky, that's where they were at that time. It was a room with damp running down the walls, with broken windows, and she was sitting on a mat, a plastic UNHCR mat in the corner, holding this tiny newborn baby. She was very, fortunately for me, it was a second child, so she knew what was doing. I forgot to tell you that when he asked me to go and look after this lady, my initial reaction in entrenched NHS mode is, but I'm not a midwife. And he said, but Anne, the deed is done. So basically, get on with it. So this lady explained to him what her concerns were, and the baby was actually becoming jaundiced, and she was very worried about this. And in her culture, what she would do would be to eat raw garlic and then feed the baby. And I left them and went out and asked somebody to buy some garlic for me, and I took this clove of garlic back to her. And the relief and the gratitude on her face when I gave her this small bulb of garlic, it just undid me. I had to turn around and walk away and stand somewhere quiet for about 30 seconds before a small boy came and tugged on the back of my shirt and said, "Lady, lady, shoes, shoes." which was a very constant refrain. But what that story sort of shows is that I could do very little for her, very, very little. But the smallest thing, like a bulb of garlic, meant so much to her. So although we can't solve the refugee crisis, we can't change the situation, even small things that we can do really, really do make a difference. One other very small thing during that time, there was never enough food. The food that is provided for the refugees is not brilliant, and it certainly isn't focused for children. And we were constantly going out and buying boxes of bananas and yogurts and something to feed the children with. And one day one of the volunteers had gone out and she'd bought a box of wraps, and these wraps had vegetables and a few chips in them. And we were walking through the camp, I'm just talking to people, and this little girl who was about 4 came towards me with her wrap, and she took a chip out and she held it up to me. So they were just little things from 2015 that are etched in my mind and I'll never forget. Much like Louise and I shared a lot of experiences and sort of welded us together, so much so that we nearly came out tonight as identical twins.
I had a striking top on, I'm glad I got changed. It was exactly the same.
So I went back to Leros in October last year. I didn't go as a volunteer, but while I was there, I really did want to see what was happening to the refugee situation. Leros is about 8 miles long and a couple of miles wide. It has a population between 8 and 10,000. And when I was there in October, there were over 1,000 refugees. The refugees are, the majority of them, of that 1,050 that were there then, 850 were in what's called the hotspot. There are 5 hotspots in Greece, which are areas which, when Europe stopped allowing refugees to cross borders, there was an agreement between the EU and Greece to contain the refugees in Greece. So there are 5 island hotspots. There's one in Chios, one in Lesbos, one in Leros, one in Samos, and one in Kos. And if you're going to be on any of them, I think probably Leros is the least worst. But the refugees are housed, 850 of them are housed behind a wire fence in containers which are essentially very bare, too hot in summer and cold in the winter, and about 2 miles away from the nearest town. Some refugees who are deemed more vulnerable are in other accommodation, and I went to visit one of those, and that's run by Leros Solidarity Network, which is the charity that we worked with when we were there. They had over 100 people in this building which had been a disused hospital. It was derelict, and they had done their best to make it habitable again. Lots of shared spaces, cooking facilities out in a yard at the back, a kitchen that had been installed by an Irish charity, and shared communal bedrooms. A lovely Afghani family invited me to see their space, and they were a family. She was a teacher, he was a nurse, and they had 3 children, twins who were 16, one of whom spoke 4 languages, and 2 younger children. And they essentially had bunk beds, and the mum had put fabric around them to give that family some privacy. They were sharing this room with other families. I went out into the yard, and the children were out there, and there wasn't a single item of play equipment for the children in that yard. There was a little boy who was learning to walk, and his walking frame thing was an upturned plastic chair which he was pushing around the yard. However, sad as that made me, it was better than what I saw in 2015. People weren't living in a derelict building with water coming through the roof. They did have electricity, and they did have communal space, and they did have people around who cared about them, which was definitely positive. So from there I went to the school, and that again is a new development since 2015, and about 100 of the over 1,000 refugees are children at this school. They are aged from 6 to 12 in one group and 12 to 18 in the other group. And they have an abbreviated school day, but they have... It was great to see kids playing in the playground and actually just being children. I was invited into the classrooms. They focus very much on Greek, English, maths, and then they have craft and art activities and even yoga. So I really enjoyed seeing the positivity of the school, and I thought I came away feeling really uplifted from that. I also visited Echo 100, which is an Austrian charity. You'll notice that all these things are like small people that you've never heard of. There's no big charities there doing anything. Echo 100 act as a bridge between organisations, and they provide this educational hub where adult refugees can go. So they have language classes, they have computer classes, music lessons, they learn CV writing skills, they do maths, and they do things like have barbering workshops. One of the refugees is a barber, and he's teaching barbering skills to others. One of the refugees is a seamstress, and she's teaching needlework. They also have social activities, and they have a football team. And this is great because it brings people together and gives them hope, because these people are on the island. Now the islands are a sort of holding camp. When we were there in 2015, people were on the island for about 5 days before they would go to the mainland and then onwards to whatever was their hopeful new destination. Now they're contained, and they can be there for 2 years. So people need hope, they need positivity. So this is what the hub actually helps to give them. And the football team, I thought, was a brilliant thing. They play on AstroTurf. They wear the special AstroTurf shoes, but they don't have a pair each. They have communal shoes, which means that sometimes the guys play in the wrong size shoes. But they just played the local Leros team, and they beat them. So, what was also lovely, I thought, was that one of the guards from the camp, because the camp where... I'm sorry, I'm sort of not doing this in very good order. But when people arrive on the island, they're contained in this camp, which has got wire fencing around it, and they're there for 23 days or thereabouts while all the paperwork is completed. And then after that time, they're allowed to go outside of the camp. And there are guards. So this football team played the Leros team, and one of the Leros team was actually one of the camp guards. And I thought this was wonderful because it's a great way to break down barriers and bring people together and see each other just as people. So, thank you. Yeah. So they were all really positive things I saw, and things were, although there's a lot that needs doing, I did see things that gave me hope and optimism for the future. And then on the last day I was there, I saw a lady walking, and she was walking back from the main town of Laki, and she was walking back to the refugee hotspot. And she had a child here, probably about 4 months old. She was holding this child. Now, anyone who's ever held a baby knows that that's fine for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, but not for a long period. She had this child up here. She had a bag of shopping on this arm. It was a plastic carrier bag, so we all remember how they cut into your skin. And in this hand, she had the hand of a small child who was probably about 3, and his arm was like this, up next to his ear. And they were walking back from the town, so they had walked from the camp 2 miles to the town, and then they were walking back with their supplies. And what struck me was, whatever food they'd had today, they'd use that energy in this 4-mile walk there and back. And it also struck me how this little boy was just walking. He wasn't complaining, he wasn't having a strank. He was just very patiently walking along with his mum. And I came home and I could not get this image out of my head. I just couldn't. I'm a mum and a granny, and it really impacted on me. So I came back and I talked to people, and I talked to my fellow volunteers at Renew, and they decided that perhaps we could do a fundraiser. I spoke to my wonderful family and friends who said, well, we'll pay for a buggy. And I came to a meeting at Raven and spoke like I have now, but probably a bit better. And Penny heard what I had to say, and basically the rest is history. Penny and I met for a coffee, and she said, perhaps we could do some fundraising. The human dynamo that is Penny has made this happen. So massive thanks from me personally. And have I forgotten anything?
I think so.
Thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you very much. I can talk all day about this, but usually on a one-to-one basis, as my friends will testify. But thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting us. And thank you so much to the very, very talented musicians who've so generously given us their time and are sharing their talents with us. Thank you very much.
My body's all broken and tired from the weight of the load.